Before we dive into this wild ride, drop a quick hi in the comment section. It might feel like a tiny thing, but trust me, it makes a huge difference. That simple hi tells YouTube to share this story with even more sci-fi fans, more dreamers, more explorers just like us. I'd honestly love to see where you're tuning in from. Are you watching late at night with headphones on, or blasting this on a speaker while imagining the galaxy burning? Either way, say hi. I'll be checking. Sarah was only 3 sips into what had to be the universe's worst excuse for coffee, thick, burnt, and suspiciously metallic, when the station's proximity alarms lit up like the 4th of July. They weren't just alarms. They were banshee-level shrieks, the kind that made your spine tighten and your stomach do backflips. Either the coffee machine had finally blown up for real this time, or the universe had just decided to throw humanity a very, very bad surprise party. Captain? Lieutenant Rodriguez stormed through the bridge doors like he'd just seen a ghost tax audit. His face was paler than fresh snow under a full moon. You need to see this. Right now. Like, drop your coffee right now. Sarah spun toward the viewport, and that's when her blood ran cold. The stars weren't twinkling anymore. They weren't even fading. They were being swallowed, snuffed out one after another like someone walking down a cosmic hallway flicking off light switches. But those weren't stars vanishing. No, those were ships. Colossal ships. Each one the size of Manhattan Island, blotting out the night. The Vortac Imperium had arrived. Sarah didn't need a briefing file to know what that meant, but she'd read them anyway, every page. A warlike species that swept across the galaxy like locusts, crushing 17 star systems in a single century. They didn't conquer because they had to. They conquered because it was their hobby. Their motto, roughly translated, was, "Resistance is inconvenient." And that was the polite version. Sarah exhaled slowly, the thought flashing like a knife through her mind. What would you do if you realized your entire species was about to get served as someone's lunch special? How many ships? She asked, forcing her voice steady even as her pulse tried to punch through her ribs. Rodriguez stared at the sensor readouts like they'd just insulted his mother. His voice cracked. Counting, oh hell, Captain. Over 3,000. And that's just the vanguard. They're still coming. Then, like some villain straight out of a bad sci-fi B-movie, the comm system hissed alive with a voice that sounded like broken gravel soaked in arrogance. Primitive species of the third planet. Cease resistance. Prepare for assimilation. Obey and the process will be less unpleasant. Rodriguez shot Sarah a look, the kind you give your boss when you're about to suggest something so insane it might actually work. Captain? Orders. Sarah Chin had grown up in Houston. Her grandmother had a saying, "Baby, when someone shows up uninvited to your barbecue, you don't fix them a plate, you show them the damn door." She took another sip of her atrocious coffee, smirked the same dangerous smirk that had once sent her ex-husband running for the hills, and said, "Rodriguez, patch me through to Earth Command. Tell them we've got company," and they forgot to knock. Within 6 hours, Earth was awake. Not just awake, mobilizing. Every nation with a rocket program, every scientist with a black-budget prototype, every kid with a 3D printer suddenly mattered. NASA dusted off designs they'd sworn were impossible. SpaceX engineers stopped worrying about cost and started strapping boosters to anything that would fly. Hackers hijacked satellites. College students reprogrammed old telescopes into targeting arrays. And that one guy in Ohio who swore he'd been building a particle cannon in his garage? Yeah, it turns out he actually had. And it worked. The Vortac expected begging. They expected tears. They expected the same tired routine they'd seen 100 times before. Overwhelming force, unconditional surrender, another species reduced to ash and chains. They did not expect Earth. Every comm frequency across the solar system lit up as Admiral Jackson's voice rolled out, smooth, unshakable, dripping with Texan confidence. "To our uninvited guests making a mess of our backyard, wrong neighborhood, boys. You don't walk into Earth without paying the cover charge." On the Vortac flagship, Warlord Thekvar watched the human chatter with an expression that passed for amusement among his kind. These fragile bipeds had only just cracked faster than light travel, and here they were posturing like titans? His mandibles clicked in a sound like laughter. "Send the first wave," he ordered with casual disdain. "Show them why resistance is not only futile, it's suicide." 200 Vortak battleships broke formation and descended toward Earth, their weapons igniting with power enough to shatter continents, split oceans, erase cities in a blink. This was supposed to be the climax, the moment when humanity panicked, groveling at their knees. But as Thekvar would soon discover, humans don't panic the way the galaxy expects. Humans laugh. Instead of terror, something happened that had never occurred in 17 previous conquests. The humans started laughing. Have you ever seen someone grin at the Grim Reaper, then crack a joke while staring down the barrel of extinction? That's pure human energy right there. As the Vortak fleet dropped into Earth's atmosphere, expecting whimpers, surrender papers, and cities begging for mercy, they got Creedence Clearwater Revival. Specifically, Fortunate Son, blasting at full volume across every channel, every frequency, every signal the Imperium had. What is this noise? Warlord Thekvar demanded, mandibles twitching in irritation. One of his comm officers bowed nervously. It appears to be some form of auditory communication, Warlord. Primitive music. Then silence it. We cannot, sir. They are overriding all channels. Even our encrypted bands. Thekvar's claws dug into the command rail. The music only got louder. And then, like the universe had been waiting for its cue, the skies above every major human city ignited. Not with Vortak bombardments, but with Earth's welcome party. Thousands of missiles, jury-rigged railgun slugs, and what looked suspiciously like mining equipment turned ordnance screamed upward in a chaotic, beautiful mess. And here's the twist. Some of it actually worked. A Vortak destroyer, one of the pride ships of the so-called invincible first wave, lurched sideways as a tungsten rod slammed straight through its shielding and gutted the hull. A second ship flared, venting atmosphere, struck by what tactical sensors identified as industrial explosives. By the third casualty, the bridge crew was staring at their readouts in disbelief. What are they firing? A panicked officer cried. These weapons, they are crude. Kinetic projectiles. Chemical explosives. How are they penetrating our shields? Here's the thing about humans the Vortak never researched. If we can't out-tech you, we'll out-volume you. If one bullet doesn't work, we'll throw 10,000. If one missile fails, we'll launch 100 more, strapped with duct tape and desperation. Those primitive weapons? The missiles weren't just missiles. They were tungsten rods designed to hit like orbital sledgehammers. The railguns weren't firing practice slugs. They were depleted uranium sabos accelerated to relativistic speeds. That industrial equipment? Mining charges, retooled into planet-to-orbit shotgun blasts. The first Vortak cruiser fell flaming into the Pacific Ocean, the impact sending tsunamis that glittered in satellite feeds. The second smashed into the Nevada desert, detonating with such force the U.S. Geological Survey had to log it as a magnitude 4.2 earthquake. On his flagship, Warlord Thekvar's mandibles twitched in what the humans might have called the first crack of fear. His invincible fleet was actually bleeding. Send the second wave, he snarled. And prepare the planetary bombardment cannons. But what happened next would be studied in every military academy for centuries, if the galaxy had centuries left. Because as the Vortak primed their world-ending weapons, humanity didn't just dig in, they improvised. The International Space Station sprouted new modules overnight, mysterious constructions that definitely hadn't been approved by any government. Amateur ham radio operators coordinated frequencies that, when combined, pulsed like a massive planet-wide network. Hackers stitched satellites into a unified targeting grid. And in Silicon Valley, every tech billionaire suddenly announced they were testing revolutionary propulsion concepts, which just so happened to look like weapons platforms welded onto private rockets. This wasn't panic. This was the most human thing imaginable. 8 billion people MacGyvering the apocalypse into a garage project. Thekvar wanted terror. What he got instead was laughter, duct tape, rock and roll, and the opening moves of humanity's first galactic war. Ever wonder what 7 billion angry humans can accomplish when they all decide they're done taking crap from anyone? The Vortak bombardment began at 1430 Greenwich Mean Time. Their war beams, colossal pillars of raw energy, stabbed down from orbit, targeting New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow with enough firepower to shatter continents. These weren't weapons of intimidation. These were weapons that had cracked the crusts of planets, turned oceans into vapor, erase civilizations in seconds. And yet, the beams hit nothing. The flagship's bridge shuddered with Warlord Thekvar's fury. What? Where are the population centers? His sensor officer hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. Sir, they appear to have moved. Moved? Thekvar's growl vibrated like thunder. You cannot move cities. But the data was undeniable. Skyscrapers, blocks, entire megacities, empty. And this was Sarah Chen's masterpiece. While every eye was glued to the chaos in orbit, she'd pulled off the single largest evacuation in the history of the species. 7 billion people hadn't vanished. They'd spread. They'd dug in. They'd gone guerrilla, preparing for the kind of fight humanity excels at: ugly, close quarters, and deeply, deeply personal. But that wasn't the surprise. The real shock came when the Vortak tried landing ground troops to flush out the scattered humans. Their troop transports hit atmosphere, only to be met by something their tactical computers screamed was impossible. Other ships. Human ships. Thousands of them. Sir, a trembling Vortak officer stammered, I'm detecting approximately 10,000 new vessels. That's impossible, Thekvar snapped. The humans do not possess 10,000 ships. They do now, Warlord. Because when you threaten Earth, you don't just wake up soldiers. You wake up everyone. Engineers. Mechanics. Tinkerers. Farmers with welding torches. Teenagers with coding skills. Billionaires with private launch vehicles. Every SpaceX Falcon Heavy was stripped and refitted into a missile platform. Every satellite, military or commercial, was converted into a kinetic bombardment system. Rich guys' orbital yachts suddenly sprouted railguns. Hell, the U.S. Coast Guard showed up with cutters that had been refitted into spacefaring gunboats. And then came the detail that made Thekvar's blood run cold in his alien veins. Sir, his tactical officer whispered almost reverently, the human vessels, they are not just armed. They're beautiful. And he was right. Humanity's crash-built fleet wasn't a patchwork mess. It was art. Sleek lines, graceful arcs, dangerous curves, deadly but elegant in a way that spoke of creativity, of imagination, of minds that refused to color inside the lines. These weren't desperate weapons. They were masterpieces, born in fire, hammered in necessity, finished in sheer defiance. And when the fleet moved, the galaxy realized something terrifying. They didn't just fight. They danced. The new human ships weaved between Vortak formations with the rhythm of a symphony, their thrusters burning in perfect unison. It wasn't random, it was choreographed like ballet in vacuum. Every maneuver calculated not only for tactical advantage but for psychological devastation. The Vortak came to teach humanity fear. Instead, they were watching war turn into performance art, an entire species turning survival into theater. You ever underestimate someone so badly it makes your stomach drop? The Vortak were having that feeling. On a galactic scale, how are they flying like that? Thekvar snapped, mandibles clattering with fury. Our intelligence reports said these creatures barely had spaceflight, that they were children playing with rockets. His trembling sensor officer swallowed hard. Sir, our intelligence may have been outdated. How outdated? The officer winced. Approximately 12 hours, Warlord. That was the moment Warlord Thekvar began to suspect, that he had made a catastrophic mistake. The battle stretched across 18 brutal hours. Orbit burned with streaks of fire as ships died by the dozens. Every time the Vortak thought they had cornered humanity, the humans pulled off something impossible. When tactics failed, they improvised. When improvisation wasn't enough, they innovated. When innovation hit its ceiling, they got mean. And that was the secret. Humanity's genius wasn't just invention. It was spite. Pure, stubborn, try me again and see what happens spite. From her command post on Station Olympus, Sarah Chen watched the tactical feeds like a chess master savoring a checkmate. What had begun as an invincible armada of 3,000 Vortak warships was now a limping shadow of itself, barely half that number, bleeding fire into Earth's skies. But the true breaking point didn't come from ships or weapons or orbital tactics. It came when the Vortak made their most desperate and fatal mistake. They tried to take hostages. A strike team swooped down on a small Montana settlement, 300 humans, mostly farmers and their families. Thekvar sent his ultimatum: surrender the planet or watch them die. Now, what do you think happened next? If your answer is Earth surrendered to save the hostages, then friend, you don't know humans. 4 hours later, that strike team found themselves staring down not Earth's military, but 2,000 heavily armed civilians who seemed to rise out of the Montana wilderness like ghosts. They weren't soldiers. They were neighbors, ranchers, hunters, mechanics, people who knew those hostages personally, who'd shared Sunday dinners with them, fixed their tractors, borrowed their lawn mowers. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes of furious, surgical violence. When it was over, every single hostage was alive. Every Vortak invader was not. And that was the lesson carved into the Imperium's bones. You don't take humans' family. Not unless you're ready to burn. For the first time in his career, Warlord Thekvar understood true fear. He wasn't fighting a military. He was fighting a species. As dawn rose over Earth for the second day of what history would remember as the Very Short War, something unprecedented happened. The losing side, the Vortak Imperium, asked for a ceasefire. Attention, human forces. Thekvar's voice crackled over every frequency, stripped of arrogance, heavy with desperation. We wish to discuss terms. Admiral Jackson's reply hit the galaxy like a gunshot. His words weren't just for the Vortak. They were for everyone listening. Sure thing, big guy. Here are our terms. You leave. No. And you take every piece of junk you dragged into our backyard with you. The pause was long. Then Thekvar spoke. That is acceptable. But Jackson wasn't done. His tone sharpened, every syllable a dagger. Oh, and one more thing. You're going to carry a message. You're going to tell every would-be conqueror in this galaxy what you learned here. Thekvar hesitated. And what exactly did we learn? The channel shifted. Sarah Chen's voice came through, calm, steady, immortal. From Station Olympus, she delivered the line that would etch itself into galactic memory forever. You learned that humans don't play defense. We play offense. And when someone threatens our home, we don't just fight back. We make damn sure you never want to try again. The Vortak withdrew at once, their fleets limping away like whipped hounds. But before they jumped out of the system, Thekvar sent one last message, not to Earth Command but to the Galactic Council itself, the shadowy arbiters of galactic order. It was short, brutal, final. Update the registry. The humans are not to be contacted, conquered, or threatened under any circumstances. Mark their system as restricted space. Highest threat level. The Council's reply came back almost instantly. Understood, Warlord. Adding humans to the Do Not Disturb list. Sarah Chen froze, her mind catching on a single word. Wait, adding? She turned to Rodriguez. As in, there are others already on that list? Rodriguez gave a low whistle. Sure sounds like it, Captain. That's when Earth Command received a transmission, this time not from the battered Vortak, but from somewhere deeper, older. A voice spoke across every channel, calm, deliberate, and in perfect English. Greetings, humans of Earth. We are the Galactic Council. We apologize for the Vortak Imperium's violation of established protocols. This attack was unauthorized. Jackson leaned forward, frowning. Protocols? What protocols? The protocols, the voice replied smoothly, that classify your species as dangerous. Do not engage. We've been observing your development for some time. We had hoped you would remain, contained, on your homeworld a while longer. Sarah's eyes narrowed. So, you knew about us all this time, and just decided to avoid us. Correct, the council voice said without hesitation. We do not provoke certain species. Species that respond to existential threats not with retreat, but with fury. Species that innovate under fire. Species that transform their entire civilization into a weapon the moment survival is at stake. Jackson crossed his arms. And let me guess, we're one of those species. Pause. Then flatly, you are the species. The example we use when warning others what not to awaken. Sarah Chin looked out across orbit, where wreckage from the Vortak fleet drifted alongside the wild, improvised human armada. Ships cobbled together in garages, jury-rigged with duct tape and sheer stubbornness. Piloted by people who'd learned dogfighting from video games and YouTube. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. She exhaled. So what happens now? The council's voice carried an odd note of resignation. Now, you join us if you wish. But understand this, no one will oppose you openly. Fear travels faster than light and your reputation is already spreading. The Vortak are finished. Their colonies are rebelling as we speak. Other empires will reconsider their ambitions. And so it was. 3 months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood aboard Unity, Earth's first official embassy ship, staring out at a gathering unlike any in history. Former Vortak colonies, long enslaved, now declared independence the moment they heard the word humans. Smaller powers scrambled to send emissaries, eager to be seen as early allies. Even the Council itself bent over backwards to accommodate Earth's demands, afraid that denying a single request might spark something. Because it wasn't just victory that terrified the galaxy. It was how quickly humans had adapted. How fast they had turned from victims into victors. How easily they had changed the game. For the first time in galactic memory, a new power had arrived on the stage. Not a cautious one. Not a patient one. But a species with a simple, terrifying creed. You don't come to Earth. Because if you do, Earth comes for you. The galaxy had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for someone, anyone, to prove that the so-called invincible conquerors could bleed. Humanity hadn't just won a war. They'd lit the fuse of a revolution. But here's the part even the Galactic Council didn't quite grasp. The real victory wasn't the fleet. It wasn't the weapons or the allies or even the sudden respect and quiet terror now rippling across the stars. No, the real victory was far simpler. And infinitely more dangerous. 7 billion humans had just learned in the span of 24 hours that together they could do anything. A planetary evacuation in half a day? Done. A space armada built from spare parts, duct tape, and raw determination? Easy. A global defense grid improvised from satellites, fishing boats, and Elon Musk's leftover toys? Child's play. Commander Rodriguez of the brand new Terran Defense Force put it best. You know what the scariest part is? We were just getting started. Sarah Chin stood at her post on Station Olympus, staring at the stars. Only now, those stars didn't look like threats waiting in the dark. They looked like invitations, possibilities. She smiled, that sharp, unsettling smile her ex-husband had once called the smile of someone about to start trouble. And trouble was exactly what humanity did best. The Vortak had broken the oldest rule of the galaxy. Do not mess with humans. But humanity was already drafting a new one. When humans decide to make friends, the galaxy better stock up on beer, barbecue, and aspirin, because it's going to be one hell of a party. Except, 3 days after the Vortak retreat, long-range sensors lit up with something else. Something vast. Something ancient. Something that made the once mighty Vortak Imperium look like a neighborhood watch with delusions of grandeur. A structure the size of a small moon, wrapped in metal and fire. Energy signatures so massive they bent instruments into nonsense. A fleet, not of hundreds but thousands, emerging from the galactic core like predators who had just caught the scent of fresh blood. And this time they weren't here by accident. They were coming specifically for the species that had just broken every rule of survival. The species that had proved they were too dangerous to ignore. The species that, for the first time in galactic history, had the entire universe wondering, what happens when humans go looking for a fight? Captain Sarah Chen was savoring her first real cup of coffee in months. Actual Colombian beans, smuggled up from Earth in a crate labeled, definitely not military rations. When the universe decided to ruin her morning. Again. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at Pluto went silent. Not storm knocked out the antenna, silent. Not even the Vortak are jamming us, silent. This was dead air. Hard zero. Every sensor went blank at the same time, like someone had erased Pluto off the galactic chalkboard. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez said in that special tone reserved for, we're all about to die horribly, announcements. Long-range scanners just picked something up. Coming from the galactic core. It's big. Sarah set her mug down with the weary resignation of a woman who knew the universe had it out for her caffeine supply. Define big, Lieutenant. Rodriguez swallowed. Remember how the Vortak fleet was about the size of Manhattan? Unfortunately, yes. This thing is about the size of Texas. And it's accelerating. Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. Of course it is. Here's the thing about saving your planet, you think the story's over. You beat the invaders, everyone cheers, roll credits. What no one tells you is that sometimes the victory is just opening a much bigger, much nastier door. Humanity's new normal was about to get a lot more complicated. Because this thing wasn't just large. It was wrong. It drifted through space like physics was an optional suggestion. Light bent around it in ways that broke computer models and made senior astrophysicists cry into their calculators. Every scan they ran came back with readings that shouldn't exist, like trying to measure a black hole with a ruler. Then the comm officer's face went pale. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. And it's addressing us. By name." The voice that slithered through their speakers wasn't alien in the traditional sense. It wasn't even a sound. It was the absence of sound shaped into words. Like hearing someone whisper from the bottom of an endless well, "Humans of Soul 3. We are the architects. Your performance has drawn our attention." Admiral Jackson's voice cut in from Earth Command, tight with suspicion. "This is Admiral Jackson of Terran Defense. State your intentions." "Our intentions are simple," the void voice replied. "Your species has violated the natural order. You have disrupted the balance. This cannot be permitted." Sarah felt a chill crawl down her spine. "What balance?" "For 3 million years," the architects intoned, "we have maintained galactic stability. Civilizations rise. They flourish. And when they grow too bold, too dangerous, they are pruned. This is order. This is survival. You have broken the pattern." And just like that, the puzzle pieces snapped together. The Vortak hadn't just shown up by chance. Their attack wasn't bad luck. It had been scheduled. The Vortak weren't conquerors. They were gardeners. And humanity had just survived being weeded out of existence. The Zephyrians developed faster-than-light communication. The architects continued with all the warmth of a tax audit. "We sent the Vortak. They returned to acceptable parameters. The Kalari built orbital habitats beyond approved specifications. We sent the Vortak. They returned to acceptable parameters." Sarah's blood froze. "How many?" The voice didn't hesitate. 7,432. "All corrected. All returned to order. Except you." Rodriguez looked like a man who'd just been told Santa Claus was real, but delivered anthrax. "What makes us different?" The answer came like a hammer. "You adapted. You evolved. You turned pruning into growth. This is unprecedented." Admiral Jackson's reply was ice-cold fury. "So you've been enslaving the entire galaxy for 3 million years, and now you're angry because we didn't roll over and die?" "We have prevented war," the architect said. "We have preserved stability. Without control there is chaos. Without order there is a chance to actually live," Sarah snapped, cutting it off. Her voice shook, but not from fear. From rage. "You didn't prevent war. You just made sure nobody could fight back. You didn't build peace, you built a prison." And that was the moment the architects made their first real mistake. Because here's the thing about humans, something even ancient, galaxy-spanning puppet masters didn't understand. We don't take orders from bullies. We break them. The architect ship was less a vessel and more a continent in orbit. A thing so massive it had its own gravity-driven weather patterns, lightning storms flickering across hull plates the size of mountain ranges. It hung over Earth like a thundercloud made of nightmares and engineering humanity couldn't even begin to parse. Every sensor on the planet screamed. The power signature was obscene. Next to this thing, nuclear reactors barely registered as candle flames on a birthday cake. The void voice boomed again, rolling through satellites, radios, and even the deep-sea fiber lines. "You will return to acceptable parameters. Dismantle your fleets. Abandon your colonies. Restrict your development to pre-industrial levels." Admiral Jackson's reply was steady, but everyone already knew the script. "And if we refuse? Then you will be returned to acceptable parameters involuntarily." And that should have been it. The end of humanity's brief rebellion. The point where the audience expects the underdog to bow, because surely you can't punch back against a god-tier empire that's been micromanaging the galaxy for 3 million years. Except, the architects had made one fatal mistake. They thought humans valued survival above all else. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of Station Olympus, staring at the impossible machine blotting out the stars. That ship could probably split the Earth in half just by trying. And she laughed. Not a hysterical laugh. Not a doomed laugh. But the laugh of someone who had just connected a 3 million-year-old cosmic joke and realized humans had the punchline. "Rodriguez," she said, wiping a tear of mirth, "patch me into the net. All of it. Ships, colonies, outposts. Hell, if someone's got a walkie-talkie on Titan, I want it. Captain, what are you? Just do it." Seconds later, every human ear from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt heard her voice. "Attention, humanity. So, funny story. Turns out the galaxy's basically been run by a cosmic homeowners association for 3 million years. And they're upset because, wait for it, we didn't ask permission before redecorating our corner of the block." There was silence for a beat. Then the laughter started, gritty, furious, defiant laughter echoing across every human comm line. Because humans knew a bully when they saw one. Sarah's grin was sharp enough to cut steel. "So here's the deal. They want us to tear down everything we've built. Give up our colonies. Crawl back into caves. Well, we don't do caves. We do skyscrapers. Starships. Coffee in orbit. And if these architects think they're going to shut us down," she leaned forward, her voice a knife's edge of fire, "then they're about to find out what 7 billion pissed-off humans can build when you tell us no." What happened next caught even the architects off guard. Instead of panic, there was excitement. Instead of despair, there was rage turned into momentum. And instead of surrender, there was 7 billion innovators, tinkerers, hackers, welders, dreamers, suddenly all working in the same direction. Within hours, Mars, Luna, Titan, Ceres, and every orbital dockyard were alive with activity. Not evacuations. Not white flags. Construction. Weapons. Defenses. Prototypes that no sane engineer would sign off on, but that desperate, brilliant humans were throwing together anyway. On Earth, whole cities lit up with factory lines. Families dragged scrap into garages. Farmers welded repurposed harvesters into armored haulers. Teenagers broke down game consoles to jury-rigged navigation computers. Somewhere in Kansas, a grandmother built a particle cannon out of irrigation pumps. It was chaos. It was nonsense. It was beautiful. On the architect flagship, a technician approached their commander with visible unease. "Sir, the humans are building again." "Of course they are. Destroy their construction facilities." "That's the problem, sir. There are no centralized facilities. They're building everywhere. In garages, in fields, in personal vehicles. Some appear to be repurposing children's toys." The architect commander tilted its head, confused. "Children's toys?" "Yes, sir. Our scans indicate several thousand projects simultaneously. Some are weapons. Others appear to be art installations. One is, something called a flamethrower banjo." The chamber filled with static silence. The architects, masters of order, balance, and predictability, found themselves staring at something they had never encountered in 3 million years of control. Organized chaos. And for the first time, the galaxy's gardeners began to wonder if they'd just unleashed a species they couldn't prune back. But humanity wasn't fighting alone anymore. Word of the architect revelation spread across the galaxy like faster-than-light gossip. The kind that doesn't just travel, it infects. And suddenly, every species that had ever been returned to acceptable parameters found themselves very, very interested in evening the score. The Zephyrians, whose FTL comm grid had been dismantled centuries ago, rebuilt it in 3 days. Not centuries, not decades. 3 days. All because they stole the human idea of distributed mesh networks. Decentralize everything, some kid on Mars had posted, and the Zephyrians just did it. The Kalari? The architects had smashed their orbital habitats a millennium ago. Now, using human-inspired modular design, they launched 3 habitats in a week. Each one was deliberately shaped into a middle finger visible from orbit. Even the Vortac, once the architects' enforcers, joined in. Turns out being the galaxy's cosmic gardeners leaves you with a lot of buried resentment. Their colonies started retrofitting defenses with human blueprints and, in the words of one Vortac general, weaponized spite. On the architect flagship, tension built like static before a storm. "Sir," a technician said, voice unusually tight, were receiving transmissions from multiple sectors. Zephyrian, Kalari, even Vortac colonies. And, the commander demanded, "They're coordinating." The chamber went silent. Coordinating what? Rebellion, sir. For the first time in 3 million years, the architects experienced something they'd forgotten how to feel: doubt. What followed over the next week was something their models had never accounted for. Humanity didn't just adapt to a threat. Humanity weaponized adaptation itself. Every human colony turned into a research lab. Every ship became a testbed. Every internet-connected human became part of the galaxy's largest think tank. Problems didn't last months anymore. They evaporated in hours under the combined weight of 1 billion caffeine-fueled arguments. They cracked new materials while trying to build better coffee makers. They stumbled on new propulsion tech during a live stream about pizza delivery in orbit. They made AIs so advanced the architects' own systems flagged them as existentially concerning. And because they were human, they did it all on Twitch. Captain Sarah Chin leaned back on Olympus Station, watching the chaos bloom with the weary pride of someone watching Thanksgiving dinner descend into madness. Except instead of turkey, her family was serving up a technological revolution with a side of interstellar rebellion. Status: Rodriguez. Rodriguez flipped through a datapad that was smoking from overuse. "Well, Captain, the good news is, faster-than-light comms solved, self-replicating construction online, and a Detroit teenager just turned solar wind into a directed energy weapon." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And the bad news? The Detroit kid wants a patent. Lawyers are already fighting over interplanetary intellectual property law." Sarah laughed. Only humans would start a legal dispute in the middle of a galactic war. Meanwhile, the architects were unraveling. "Sir," another technician stammered, "the humans have neutralized our neural suppression fields." The commander's voice was ice. "Impossible. Those fields operate on quantum consciousness levels. No primitive could even detect them." "They detected them, sir. With modified cooking appliances." "What?" "Specifically, microwave ovens. Apparently, if you tinker with them, they can sense consciousness field fluctuations. They've distributed the schematics globally. Every human settlement now has early warning detection made from kitchen gear." The commander's core vibrated with something he hadn't felt in epochs. Rage and, was that a headache? "Deploy the distortion fields. Cripple their technology." "We tried, sir." The technician swallowed hard. "They built analog backups. Mechanical relays. Vacuum tubes. Slide rules. In some cases, they're outperforming our quantum systems." The silence was heavy, broken only when another technician whispered the words that curdled the commander's thoughts. "Sir, they're laughing at us." And across the stars it was true. Billions of humans were laughing. At their fear, at their control, at their authority. The architects had wanted order. What they got instead was humanity. And humanity was chaos with a grudge. 7 days after the architects arrived to return humanity to acceptable parameters, the unthinkable happened. They were losing. Not just in space, where the improvised human fleet now contained ships that bent physics like origami in ways the architects' models couldn't explain. They were losing the galaxy itself. One by one, species they had managed for millennia stood up, declared independence, and began experimenting with terrifying speed using human-inspired ideas. Then came the final straw. The architects unveiled their ultimate sanction, the reality editing device. A weapon so powerful it could overwrite local physics. Fusion wouldn't ignite. Antimatter wouldn't annihilate. Circuits, superconductors, even basic particle interactions, all collapsed into silence. When they activated it, the galaxy went dark. Every human ship, every station, every device, dead. For a heartbeat, it looked like the end. And then the lights came back on. First the backup systems. Then the backup systems. Then the "my cousin Jerry welded this in his garage" systems. Then the ones nobody had documented because they were built by hobbyists who thought, what if we tried running a starship off car batteries and hamster wheels just to see? By the end of the day, not only was humanity back online, everything worked better than before. Faster. More resilient. More chaotic. The architects finally understood. They weren't fighting a civilization. They were fighting an idea. and ideas cannot be conquered. Captain Sarah Chin was halfway through her morning coffee, a ritual she refused to skip, even during cosmic warfare, when the message arrived. Humans of Soul, 3. We request parley. Admiral Jackson snorted. You mean surrender? There was a pause long enough to suggest frantic committee meetings among beings who hadn't needed a committee in 3 million years. We acknowledge that our previous approach may have been counterproductive. Sarah leaned back, grinning. You mean wrong? Another pause. We acknowledge that forcible parameter adjustment is no longer feasible with your species. You mean we kicked your ass so hard you're scared to try again? A silence. Then, we are prepared to discuss alternative arrangements. Sarah sipped her coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, she said over the fleet-wide channel, I think we just made the architects blink. But the real victory wasn't forcing ancient cosmic overlords to negotiate. The real victory was what happened next. In a single week, 17 species came together to build a neutral station for negotiations. Built by volunteers. Built fast. Built beautifully. The station itself was the opening statement. We don't need permission anymore. When the architects arrived, they carried themselves with the dignity of gods who had ruled since before Earth's sun was a newborn star. When they left, they carried signed documents that essentially amounted to, please don't erase us from history faster than we're already erasing ourselves. The Galactic Cooperative Treaty was born. Its clauses were simple, radical, and utterly unthinkable just a month before. Every species had the right to develop without imposed limits. Technology was to be shared, not hoarded. The galaxy belonged to everyone, not just the ancients. And most importantly, anyone who tried to rule by force would find themselves facing humanity and their very enthusiastic friends. At the signing ceremony, Sarah found herself standing across from the architect representative. Its voice, usually thunder, was quiet now. So what happens now? She asked. The ancient being hesitated. Now we learn. Sarah tilted her head. Learn what? The architect's eyes dimmed, but not with defeat, something closer to humility. How to live in a galaxy we do not control. It has been a very long time. And that was when Sarah realized something that made her prouder than any battle won, any weapon forged, any fleet rallied. Humanity hadn't just defended itself. Humanity had taught the galaxy how to be free. 3 months later, Captain Sarah Chin stood on the observation deck of humanity's new flagship. It was no ordinary vessel. It was part battleship, part research ark, part art installation. Forged by human engineers, shaped by Zephyrian dream architects, and assembled with Kalari orbital construction so seamless it made the stars themselves jealous. It was, somehow, both the most beautiful and most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever seen. A warship that looked like it had been built to host a concert and a coronation at the same time. But the real revolution wasn't floating in orbit. It wasn't even technological. It was philosophical. Humanity had proven that cooperation beats control. That creativity shreds intimidation. That 7 billion individuals arguing on the internet could outthink, outbuild, and outlast a system designed for 3 million years to keep everyone in their lanes. The galaxy was shifting. Species once shackled by architect parameters were sharing technologies that had been buried in vaults for eons. New alliances sprouted daily, not because anyone ordered it, but because neighbors were suddenly free to knock on each other's doors. Trade routes opened, carrying not just goods but ideas, jokes, music, and arguments. And at the chaotic, glorious center of it all, humanity kept doing what it did best, taking impossible situations and turning them into opportunities. Captain, Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts, we're receiving a priority message from Earth. Sarah didn't even turn. What now? He hesitated, then grinned. Apparently some ancient machine intelligence from the galactic rim has been monitoring our activities. They'd like to discuss, quoting here, mutual cooperation and the sharing of technologies for the betterment of all sentient life. For a long moment, Sarah gazed out at the stars. Once they had looked like threats. Now they looked like invitations. And she started laughing. Rodriguez, send them our standard response. He raised an eyebrow. Which one standard? Welcome to the party. Bring snacks. Because 3 million years of oppression had taught humanity a secret. The best way to handle ancient, terrifying, potentially dangerous entities was to make them feel welcome, get them talking, and see if they wanted to help build something amazing. But every party needs a soundtrack. And as the new Galactic Alliance tuned its instruments, something stirred in the dark spaces between galaxies. Something that had been watching. Something that thought the architects were soft, too gentle, too willing to preserve when true power demanded purity. Something that didn't believe in cooperation. It believed in cleansing.